On. We did have, yes, thank you, Jackie. We did have 57 people sign up. So um, then we hope to have close to that number at least with us today. So thanks, everybody. My name's Debbie Ingram. I am the chair of the Justice and Witness Ministries Committee of the conference. And we're a hearty band of souls from across the state who try to find out what congregations are doing in the areas of social justice, particularly focusing on racial justice and environmental justice and global ministries. And we try to find out what's going on and bring congregations together, share ideas, so that we can all share in the good fight for social justice. So when we had the annual meeting back in April, our new reality had just begun with this new administration. And so now we're 9 months in, and we wanted to kind of recap some of the things that we heard at annual meeting and also discuss what's been going on in some of our congregations since then. And hopefully that will give you some ideas about things that you might do in your area. And also, hopefully, it will be somewhat inspiring and motivating as well. So we'll just dive right in. I took the recordings of Marvin Ellison and of Carter Heyward. Marvin Ellison was our keynote speaker, you'll remember, and Carter Heyward wrote a book that a good many people read before annual meeting, and then we had her on Zoom before annual meeting and listened to her and had a discussion with her. So I've taken both of their remarks and edited them down into it's a 20-minute video. So we'll start with that because that recaps what they said to us and some of the suggestions that they made. So hope that sets the context for you. So if you'll bear with me, um, I will go ahead and share that.
Thrilled to have with us today as our keynote speaker, the Reverend Dr. Marvin Ellison, who is a theologian, an ethicist, and a tireless advocate for social justice.
Christian nationalism is best described as a political ideology and cultural framework that seeks to merge Christian and American identities. It relies heavily upon the mythological founding of the United States as a Christian nation, singled out for God's special favor. It's not a stretch to say that Christian nationalists promote white supremacy alongside Christian supremacy. The two are deeply intertwined. First, there's the claim that America was founded by and for white European Christians. A second claim follows that the future of this nation depends upon white Christian men exercising political control and cultural dominance. For many white people, social equality is a frightening prospect, especially in relation to immigrants, people of color, and others designated as culturally inferior. To them, social equality signals loss. The loss of preferred status and a shameful kind of demotion, especially if you feel entitled to a disproportionate share of power, resources, and deferential treatment is your God-given right. The MAGA movement promotes a truncated notion of we the people. Outsiders are viewed as dangerous, including Blacks in big cities, Mexican and Central American refugees at the border, immigrants from Muslim-majority countries, drag queens at children's story hours, and transgender athletes and military personnel. By insisting on white Christian America first, Trump and the MAGA movement have signaled their preferential option: the protection and privileging of all things white, male, cisgender, Christian, and uber wealthy. I wager that there's only one way to defeat authoritarianism: by standing in solidarity with others, maintaining an unflinching commitment to the common good, and doing the hard work of rebuilding communities grounded in justice, mutual respect, and mutual care, leaving not one person out. Our national crisis has come about because of the well-organized, well-funded rise of Christo-fascism. The necessary response to Christo-fascism is to take a side, act courageously, and yes, fight like hell. To stay in the struggle, we must first be in the struggle. And the problem here, especially for those of us nurtured in the white Christian tradition, is that we've been socialized to fear and avoid conflict, to prefer conversation over confrontation, and to prioritize personal transformation over political engagement and communal struggle. I'm persuaded that our spiritual work at this moment is not to keep the peace or somehow build bridges to win over white power Christians. While yes, we should respect MAGA Christians as fellow human beings and not wish them harm, at the same time, we're under no obligation to respect their hateful politics or tolerate their callous violations of others. We need to keep asking, what does ministry require of us in the context of authoritarianism? What does faithful, effective resistance look like? Truthful naming is a good starting point. Our national crisis is indeed political and economic, but it's also moral and spiritual, which places matters squarely within our wheelhouse. Yes, there are material concerns that people have in their lives around the economy, around safety, around other challenges like the housing crisis. But there's also a deep spiritual crisis marked by people feeling a greater sense of disconnection from one another, feeling unmoored and disconnected from sources of meaning and purpose in their lives. What then shall we do? I suggest a two-part response. First, as caregivers, we're called to notice, see each other, and do what feminist theologian Nell Morton described as hearing one another into speech. We need to extend empathy to those who are struggling, ourselves included. Second, as justice lovers, we're also called to build up resilient communities. In these difficult times, we must risk becoming more political rather than less. That means directly engaging in movement building, as messy as it may be, by joining with others, largely outside the church, in an ever-expanding, more broadly inclusive, multiracial, multi-faith, and socially diverse justice movement, grounded in respect for the earth and committed to the dignity and well-being of all people. If we're to find our way, much will be required of us, including our listening to and learning from those on the margins. Listening respectfully to marginalized persons is a necessary step, but by itself, that's not enough. Solidarity is needed. Standing shoulder to shoulder and pledging to rebuild community together. Not with us taking charge, not with us insisting on our own way, but with us learning how to be respectful allies while being transformed in the process. Some 45 years ago, Elizabeth Janeway wrote a small book called The Powers of the Weak. She was writing about movement building, and she advised us, among other things, against imitating autocrats or trying to mimic how they wield power by bullying, intimidating, and instilling fear. Instead, she urged us to model an alternative way by utilizing what she called the distinctive powers of the weak. I would call these the Christic power of justice law. The first of the powers is the power to come together. The second power is the power of disbelief, the readiness to question the way things are. A justice-loving faith says, no, the world is not as it should be. And yes, change is possible. Beyond the two powers that Janeway identified, let me add a third. The power of coming out. Embodying our values out in the world and doing it shamelessly. Autocrats encourage us to accept imperial Christianity's false claim that somehow only a strong man, only a force beyond ourselves can save us. To the contrary, social justice Christianity is grounded in a radical belief, a deep trust that only a vulnerable, compassionate God can help us. The Holy One who continues to dwell among us, not to overpower us, but to connect us in all our frailty and in all our strengths.
And so very thankful that we have Reverend Dr. Carter Heyward with us tonight.
Christian nationalism is a set of assumptions widely shared by a significant minority of Americans that our nation was founded by God to be under the authority of economically privileged white Christian men who should legislate, adjudicate, and govern the nation. These men and their allies, including some token women and people of color and other religious traditions, should be the ones to make and enforce all laws and cultural standards. These men and their allies will determine who will hold executive, judicial, and legislative positions, and who, if anyone, will vote to fill these positions. It's a very grim situation that white Christian nationalism promises to try to shape America into. The word Christian is incidental there, by the way. This is not a Christian movement. It's a political grab for power, using Christianity as a tool with the help of a lot of Christians who would go along with this. Certainly, the extreme MAGA Christians today would agree with everything I just read to describe the kind of nation they want. But my book was written not so much with MAGA Christians or extreme right-wing Christians in mind as with our mainstream moderate to liberal to progressive Christians in mind, believing that it's up to us to speak up and fight back and figure out how we're going to stop this movement to take over our nation and shape it into something quite nefarious and debilitating and oppressive, all in the name of Christ. So that's white Christian nationalism. Anyhow, in my book, I talk about other parts of the background to white Christian nationalism, and then the election of Obama, in which racism found a new way of coming out to attack Black and brown and people of color in this country, and fan flames of fear that we had this Black president. And in fact, as I'm sure many of you are aware too, that's probably a chief reason, if not the chief reason, Donald Trump decided to run, is that he hated Obama, and he hated that Obama was just a bigger man than he is in every way. So then I write this book about the 7 deadly sins, and I point out that I'm really using sin as a collective malaise that we're all infected by. This is not just about personal wrongdoing. It's that we live in sin. And I think St. Augustine said it as well as anybody when he talked about our being born into a massa damnata, a damned mass. By the time we get here as babies, we are surrounded by sin that is not of our own making. And that's the kind of sin this book is about. And that's the kind of sin I believe Christians need to be pointing out and fighting against. And if we're fighting against structural collective sin, we can find ways of not making it sound so personal against people that we disagree with, if we're all in this together. And the Christian churches have never done a good job of this because we have so bought into this myth of the individual salvation being the beginning and the end of what is of God, rather than our being born into sin, but also born into grace to fight the sin. But it's a collective movement. The sins I talk about, the lust for omnipotence, and the sin of omnipotence and entitlement, which I call sins of the spirit, something that impacts everybody universally around the world. Lusting for power over as opposed to mutuality. And then entitlement, believing that our way is the best way, sometimes the only way of God. And Christians are terrible when it comes to the sense of entitlement. And then historical sins in the United States, they also exist other places, but we have particular forms of these sins: white supremacy, misogyny, and I would add to that homophobia, because they really do go together, capitalist spirituality, and domination of the earth and its creatures. And then finally, I talk about the sin of violence, which is another sin of the spirit. And each chapter has I talk about the sin, and then it has a parallel chapter in the last part of the book in which I talk about what we can do as Christian communities to try to understand these sins and what our options are. And let me just end with this part, but I want to point out 5 things that I didn't talk so much about in my book that I would if I were doing it now. One is the role of disinformation in promoting white Christian nationalism. And by disinformation, I don't simply mean misinformation, but rather a purposeful, ill-intended, strategic lie. Telling lies for the purpose of angering, confusing, and dividing people. And if we don't take anything else away from this evening, my dear friends, I hope we'll take that away, because I think that is super important, that it's a way of destroying democracy without arousing much resistance from citizens who don't realize or cannot believe what is happening. Number three, that then leads to what Governor Pritzker of Illinois talked about the other night. We must fight like hell, my friends, now, or give up our dreams of liberty and justice for all. Raise holy hell, make good trouble, in John Lewis's words. Do whatever we must, in William Barber's words, to arrest the attention of the nation, which may mean that many of us get arrested, maybe more than once. Quite likely we will if we're on the streets protesting in ineffective, nonviolent, but disruptive ways. We're going to have to wind up making ourselves even more of a nuisance than probably we already are. We cannot compromise with white Christian nationalism. That moment is gone, and I didn't see that as clearly in my book as I do now. We don't need to be unkind. We must be empathic and compassionate, but compromise of our basic values is not an option. Number four, white Christian nationalism is all about race and gender, sexism, heterosexism, racism. Disinformation is being created as a tactic to disempower liberal Americans by focusing attention on the so-called cultural issues of race, gender, and sexuality. Look at the huge role both immigration and trans rights played in the 2024 election. And keep in mind that we're not talking about immigrants from Sweden and Finland. We're talking about immigrants from Latin America and from Africa and from Asia. That's who white Christian nationalists want to keep out. And as we know, our opponents, white Christian nationalists, have made a huge issue of particularly trans women, who they say are dangerous to our daughters, to little girls. And of course, they're going to take over women's sports and make it impossible for girls to compete fairly. And then finally, whether our Christologies, and this would be all of us, mainstream as well as right-wing Christians, have allowed a Christology of a solo Superman Christ to dominate our theological imaginations throughout our lives. MAGA Christians say Jesus is too woke. He's too soft. He's too gentle. They want a Supermensch Christ, and that is what you and I, sisters and brothers and siblings, have got to contend with. And I hope it's not too late in this moment of American history. I don't believe it is, if we really get in there and fight.
Great. So, thank you for your patience and your attention to that. We do have three other speakers. I know you might want some time to debrief that, but if you can, I did want to make sure that we get to everybody. So we'll have time at the end to have some discussion or some questions. I would just reflect. I know some of you actually probably that was the first time you may have heard them at all because I realize not everybody probably went to annual meeting. And if you didn't realize, so Carter Heyward's book is The Seven Deadly Sins of White Christian Nationalism: A Call to Action. So that was the book that she was referencing. Um, but it was interesting to me in putting this together how aligned they were in terms of our response, that we do have to really counter what's going on, that we have to be active, that the time for compromise and trying to cave or negotiate has passed. But anyway, if you'll bear with us, we'll go on to our local speakers, and then if you have any comments that you're burning to share, jot them down so you don't forget. But we'll go on. So I am pleased to introduce from the Danville Congregational Church, Dan Swainbank, who was the organizer of a series that they did there on faith and politics. So Dan, I will turn it over to you. If you can unmute.
Jackie, can you unmute Dan?
I've asked him to unmute. I can't actually unmute him.
Yeah, he has to just click. There should be a little thing you can click, Dan.
Look for the three dots on the top right corner of your name and try clicking on that, and there might be a place that says unmute.
There you go.
How about
You got it now.
I'm audible? Okay, I'm sorry for the delay. And I'm feeling after those two stirring and scholarly talks, our actions here in Danville are going to seem quite passive and patient, but let me explain what we did and why we did it, and then we can certainly talk about it later, and I don't want to take a lot of time. We did study the white supremacy curriculum from the UCC and decided that we wanted to do something a little bit broader, also collaborative, and we tried to collaborate with some other organizations, including the Vermont Humanities Council, and we got a HOPE grant from the UCC, the Vermont Conference, and also our local library. And our thinking was, let's put together a series of speeches on the general topic of separation of church and state. And among the questions that we wanted to try to answer is, what is it like to be a Christian these days? And what is historically, what are some of the ways in which scripture has been used in the public arena? Our second speaker was Debbie Ingram herself, and we entitled her talk, Elected and Ordained and Elected. And she talked about how and why she brought her faith to bear in debates on the floor of that legislature and so forth. Our third topic was the separation of church and school. And we had Tom Lovett, former headmaster of St. John's Street Academy, who's also a devout Catholic and very much involved in the local Catholic school here. And he talked about separation of church and school. Our goals were to broaden the topic a little bit away from a single topic, such as white supremacy, and to get into the idea would be to present ideas in scripture to people to think about and let them make up their own minds about how to get involved and what issues to get involved with rather than single one. The speeches were held at our church in the evening, one per month in April, May, and June. We drew pretty well. Part of our effort was to kind of give an identity to our church. And so in addition to people who came to the speeches, we got good publicity in the papers, the Caledonian Record and the North Star, and so that we hope that people would have heard about what we were up to, even if they couldn't attend. But we had good attendance, and the speakers answered questions and hopefully gave a lot of food for thought to the people who came. So maybe I'll stop there at this point if I've used up my time, and give you an idea of an outline of what we were trying to do in Danville.
Great. Thank you so much, Dan. That's really helpful. We appreciate that. Yeah, so again, save your questions if you have any, and we'll just move to Reverend Laura Engelken, who is the pastor at Mallett's Bay Congregational Church. And Laura's going to tell us about a series that they did called Soup and Substance. So Laura.
Yeah. Soup and Substance, a conversation about things that matter, was kind of the tagline. And the way we advertised it was with a HOPE grant, and did every door direct mail. So reached out to all the households within 3 miles of our congregation for a 5-part series, I guess, though people could show up at each one. So the focus was talking about freedom, and what does freedom mean from your religious or philosophical perspectives. And the way we organized that conversation was each month we would take one of the 5 rights found in the First Amendment. So we talked about freedom of speech, freedom of religion, freedom of press, all the different ones. And I would say there were 3 main goals for that series. So one was to help raise kind of not just religious literacy, but civic literacy, to help people really understand what is the First Amendment and what are those different elements that are so foundational to democracy. And also then to really develop one's understanding of what do I mean by freedom of religion? What do I mean by freedom? Where does that come from for me, for my religious and philosophical perspectives, and to hear those of other people, right? So to learn and to practice how to dialogue together, and hopefully disrupt sometimes the groupthink that can happen, that, oh, of course we all agree, which we most likely don't, but also then learn how to listen to one another respectfully, and to ask questions and engage in dialogue. And I would say lastly is to gain some comfort and practice in talking about your core values in the public sphere, right? So often the idea of like, oh, religion and politics, they need to be separate. But really, politics is asking, how do we live together? How do we figure out how to be a community? And one of the gifts and challenges of living in the United States is that we are diverse. And so how to honor that, and also to speak about faith, and kind of our understandings about what it means to be Christian, what it means to be a follower of Jesus, as well as to hear from our neighbors. So each month we would gather, we'd have soup, and some people would say, I came just for the soup. And it's like, that's okay. Soup's awesome. And 2/3 of our participants, we probably had about 18 to 20 each month. 2/3 of them were from outside the congregation, and they were really looking for an opportunity and a place to share, ideally some like-minded folks, and particularly in this moment, a place to find that they were not alone, and to be able to process some of what is going on in the nation and for themselves, because a lot of those folks don't have ready communities like some of us do who are members of a church. And so that's part of the gift that we could provide to our neighbors, and also an opportunity to build coalitions outside of our church, particularly in this moment, needing to broaden our sense of us in very intentional ways. And so, and to offer one last thing, the focus was really on facilitating conversations. We would lead with reflection, a little bit of reflection time, asking some core questions. Then we would split people into pairs so they could have a more intimate dialogue. And then they had small groups of maybe 5 to 6 people. So it was a structured discussion process. It wasn't about delivering content per se or having a speaker, but it was really helping facilitate skills in discussion building, or having discussion with people that you may not know.
Great. Thank you so much, Laura. That's very helpful. Alrighty, and our last speaker is Eloisa Kiley, whose name is not on the screen because she's at a friend's house. But Eloisa is prepared to tell us all about many things they have been doing at Charlotte Congregational Church. So, Eloisa, we need to unmute you, though.
Okay, I'm on.
Yes, you are.
Okay. Hello. Well, I'm going to use my notes. So anyway, uh, just to begin with, we're Charlotte Congregational Church, a social justice ministry, and we engage in several actions to promote our public witness for social justice. For example, in 2024, we well, some examples are for social justice and public witness is uh, with the Charlotte Library, we arranged a presentation on slow democracy, or well, a presentation on civil discourse by Susan Clark. And we've invited legislators to meet with anybody. We invite whoever wants to come to meet with legislators to discuss social injustices and how the legislature can respond. We've co-hosted a session on housing crisis, gun violence, and gun safety. And we, with the Charlotte, we supported the Charlotte Library on a display of banned books. Let's see, uh, we give financial donations to Vermont organizations working for social justice, such as the Vermont Interfaith Action, the Pride Vermont, who's, they're in trouble right now with funds. They don't have any funds, and Migrant Justice. And this spring and summer, we, well, at the request of the Old North Church of Boston, we, Good Friday, April 18th, we rang our church bell, in conjunction with Let Freedom Ring. And let's see.
And every Sunday.
What's that?
Every Sunday.
Oh yeah, that's coming up later. Yeah, yeah, we ring the bell actually every weekly on Friday at noon, and we supported our missions ministry, which is different than the social justice ministry, in the creation of a list of organizations that offer food assistance to Gaza. And this is a guide for our congregation to, this is just a creation of lists for the congregation for, to do personal donations. Recently, well, I guess it was this summer, we created a group called the Flock of Hope. And what we did was, what we are is like a group, a ready response team for rallies and other actions, such as on every Monday for a few months this summer, in the late afternoon, we held up signs of hope, peace, kindness, etc., along the road in front of our church, and we rang the bell for 5 minutes. Actually, wasn't it? Mm-hmm. We've participated in local rallies such as the No Kings, Make Good Trouble, Labor Day Workers Over Billionaires, and others. And besides relevant signs, we also held our Charlotte Congregational Church banner. And let's see. Well, let me just end with, I know I've missed something here, but our wish as Christians is to offer a message of hope and peace. So.
Great. Thank you so much, Eloisa. That's wonderful. Great, folks. So thanks for your patience, and we'll open it up for any comments or questions for any of our speakers. If you, I'll call on people. So if you want to raise your physical hand, that's cool. Or if you want to, if you know how to raise your little electronic hand, that'd be great too. And if all else fails, you can just speak up. But yes, Eloisa, go ahead. You have something else.
I just had a question on I know what separation of church and state is, but yeah, I've never heard separation of church and school. And I kind of have an idea, but I guess I'd like to know more on that.
Well,
Oh,
the idea of separation of church and state actually kind of comes from one of the clauses in the First Amendment, which is that the government shall not kind of say any one religion is the state religion. That's the non-establishment clause, like the government not establish. And then the other is free exercise clause, that the government will not either hinder or hinder folks from being able to practice their religion or force their religion or no religion. And it's important to note that it says religion or no religion. I think sometimes in terms of schools, right, we can say, oh, we aren't going to talk about religion, but we're always talking about religion because our school systems, as well as we're created really for Protestant Christianity, right? So if you think about how our school days and our work days go, we don't meet on a Sunday, but we meet on Friday, right? Which is a holy day in the Islamic tradition. And if you look at kind of the cycles of exams and vacations, they fall along Protestant understandings and expressions of religiosity. So if we don't talk about religion, we're just allowing kind of Protestant Christianity to flow. And as part of the conversation with Christian nationalism, there's an intentional choice to try and push and institutionalize a particular understanding of Christianity also in our school systems. We've seen that a lot in Texas as well as in Oklahoma, that's been a struggle point.
great. Thank you. Dan, did you have anything you wanted to add? You had a session on that too, didn't you?
No, we did. That was an excellent summary that we just heard. So I don't really have anything to add to that.
Okay, great. Thank you. Other questions or comments?
Debbie, I'm especially interested that several of the churches have shown that people are searching for a place where they can freely talk about some of the issues that we are caring about. And I had heard about it both at Mallett's Bay and at Danville, and I thought, I wonder if people out in the community will come into a church to have these discussions, but they did. And they had been really searching for other people they could talk to. And it just seems like something a little bit new that churches can really offer and make themselves known. And some people stayed and became part of the church. At least they did in Mallett Bay.
Yeah, that's awesome. Yeah. Yes, Rick.
Yes, and to follow up on that, the first action that we've already heard about is just showing up. And many of us, I'm sure, are going to the rallies, the one that's coming up tomorrow. And we show up with Charlotte Congregational Church with a big sign that just says Charlotte Congregational Church. I mean, people need to know that the churches are at these rallies, because all they're hearing about, they don't know many people don't know what Christian nationalism is. And they think, if they're not church, they think that all the churches are Christian nationalists. Well, it may get them thinking if they see a church sign again and again at the rallies where, these conversations are going on and we have the support for all of us. So I haven't seen too many at the different places of just the church being identified.
Yeah, thank you for that. Lynn.
Yeah, I want to add that at our weekly clergy call this past week, there was some question about whether churches could get in some sort of legal trouble for doing this. And I did check with the UCC attorney Heather Kimmel, who said, absolutely not. It's you're not endorsing a candidate. You're not, this is simply, or maybe not simply, but this is the way churches are choosing to express their values in a public way.
Yeah, thank you for bringing that up, Lynn. We had a little bit of discussion in the Justice and Witness Ministries Committee about this Johnson amendment that you may have heard about some in the news. There's been a push by the Trump administration to have the IRS broaden their rules about what 501c3 is the designation for nonprofit organizations, and that most churches are 501c3s for purposes of being registered with the IRS. And they're trying to the way it stands now, the one big thing that 501c3s cannot do is endorse candidates, but they can speak very freely about issues. They can talk about specific legislation. They can promote, certain bills. So that there's a lot of leeway. But the Trump administration is trying to make it so that churches can also endorse candidates, which is a little bit ironic because if conservative churches are endorsing their candidates, then that means the liberal churches could endorse candidates also. So I'm not sure what they would really accomplish according to their agenda if that happens. But at any rate, we are free, as Lynn said, absolutely, to talk about our values, and how that affects political things, and talk about specific bills, and talk about specific policies, and take a stand on those without doing any providing any danger to our nonprofit status. Great. Other questions or comments? Had all of you heard Marvin Ellison before? Or any surprises about anything he said? Yeah, Marjorie's saying yes. Were you struck by anything in particular that he said?
The entire text of Dr. Ellis's was available, and I know it was posted by the conference too. And boy, if you haven't heard that, you should definitely read through the text. It's just an excellent piece.
Yes, he is. He's quite a scholar, thinker. Yeah, very inspiring. All right. Anything else going on in anybody else's church that we haven't highlighted? Any congregations present that would like to say something about what they're doing? Sally, yeah, go ahead.
For World Communion Sunday, we actually did a community breakfast. And we took donations that we're going to use to give coupons off of the 2 local markets, off of people's groceries, to just let them know that we see that this is really hard. But what I appreciate about all of this is it is the little things that matter. Mother Teresa said, none of us can do not all of us can do great things, but we can all do little things with great love. And I think that's the point of all of this, is to be in solidarity, to know that we are on the right side of history and justice in our faith. And it's hard. It's really hard, and it's exhausting, and it's painful. But it's real, and it matters, and everybody here and everybody that we know and that we love matters in bringing forth the good that is our faith, that is love, that is right, that is life. And I just think we need to hold on to that. We need to hold on to each other. It really, really matters. So,
Yeah, thank you for that. Yeah, absolutely.
Good point.
I know that I thought I saw Ed Sunday Winters here earlier, but I know that Greensboro Church is organizing a bus for Saturday for No King's Day and are going to Montpelier. So I know that's happening.
Oh, great. Yeah, thank you, Jackie. That's cool. Good for
I'm
them.
wondering if others are aware of No King's Day on Saturday, and if
yes, a bunch, not a bunch, a few of us are going to Underhill Jericho. So, yes.
Okay. I understand there's something going on Church Street, also in Burlington. I ran into one of our clergy colleagues today.
Yeah, we're going to Virgins and Shelburne, right, Rick?
We are.
From
And in
Shot.
fact, we're gathering as church and trying to meet with our flock of hope signs and our church signs again to emphasize that it's not just one person standing out there with a sign. It's a group of church people.
We'll be there in Morrisville, so I know we'll have a good showing in Morrisville. Not just our church, but hopefully a lot of people.
Mm-hmm.
Brattleboro has a big one organized, and also Bellows Falls. So there's lots happening down in this corner of the state as well.
Mm-hmm. St. Johnsbury also, I think.
And White River Junction also had a really big gathering on the first No King's Day, and we're doing it again.
Awesome. That's great. Vermont is well represented. And it looks like Laura just put in the chat for anybody who needs more information, a link to a website that has listings of events.
Great.
Oh, and so did Jackie. So you got it twice. Awesome.
Gabby?
Also go to indivisible.com. Just search for it, and it gives a whole map of the United States with exactly where all of them are taking place throughout Vermont. Just keep clicking in.
Great. Okay. Thank you. Yeah, Marjorie and then Fred.
Just to say that College Street Church for several years now has been doing book groups on social justice issues. Sometimes some actions are come out of those book groups, but it's also been very helpful for people who are isolated or who aren't really able as easily to get out to those kinds of protests or actions in the city.
Great. Thank you. Yeah. Yeah. So Fred and then Catherine. Fred.
Yeah, I want to share a thought about the two talks because it's interesting. I'd heard both of them in relation to annual meeting. But when I heard the excerpts together, something really jumped out at me that they both shared in common was the idea of vulnerability and the importance of vulnerability as a part of our vision as religious people. And Carter used the very evocative phrase of the Superman Christ. That's an image that really permeates white Christian nationalism. And I think what's important about that issue is that an image of God or an image of Christ that's like that, it sort of shapes our whole way of seeing the world. And so it that hierarchical sense of, Jesus up there, the Savior that's going to come down and save us all, it puts us on a different level from other people as well. And it makes us less tuned into our own vulnerability. And I think when we're talking about social justice and racial justice and gender justice, all these different issues, that being in touch with the vulnerability that is the heart of our being, it's the suffering Christ, not the triumphant Christ in the sky, that I think brings out our compassion, our connection, our community, and our sense of being able to reach out to people who are suffering and perhaps less fortunate than we.
Thank you so much, Fred. Yeah, that's right on. Yeah, it was interesting when I was doing the editing to see. It's like, oh, because I hadn't remembered it that how closely aligned they were and some of the points they made. So yeah, that's really important. Catherine.
Hi, this has been such a good meeting. I've just taken so much good stuff in. I just wanted to, there's been a sort of movement by Indivisible to get churches to ring their bells at noon on No King's Day for about 5 minutes. I just want to get the word out there. It is something a lot of churches are doing. They're hoping churches across the state can do it, but I just thought I'd throw that out here. So to ring the bells at noon for about 5 minutes.
Great, thank you. Yeah.
Yeah, that is in, for those of you who receive eKit, our electronic weekly newsletter, that is in the eKit that went out today. And also just really quickly, because I'd forgotten to say this earlier, I actually texted Marvin Ellison while we've been meeting to let him know that we were, using his, a combination of his and Carter's addresses to us. And he wrote back and said, "You've made my day. What a mess we're in, and what a blessing to be wrestling together to find a way forward. Hugs, Marvin."
That's nice. Great. Thank you for sharing that, Lynn. That's great. Yeah. Awesome. All righty. Well, the recording of this will be available. Jackie's really good about making that known to everybody. So if there are other people in your congregation that you think would like to see this webinar, please let them know. And I think some of the folks who signed up and weren't able to join us will probably tune in as well. Does anybody have, you've got less than 60 seconds, but does anybody have anything they'd like to say before we?
Thank you, Debbie. You did amazing. It's amazing. It's so good.
Thank you. Thanks, Sally. I pay all the members of the committee to stroke my ego. So thank you very much.
Yes, thank you. This was great.
Yeah, great.
This was an excellent event. Thank you.
Good. Thank you all so much. It's